Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. 20 games are down as the Boilermakers sit at 19-1 following a nail-biting win over Maryland and a road cruise past Minnesota. We'll talk about both of those games a little bit here, have lots of takeaways from the past week, and just in general about Purdue basketball as they prepare for a pretty tough week. They're heading to Michigan and hosting a rematch with Michigan State. We're in the heart of the Big Ten season. We're about to the halfway point. There is no shortage of stuff to talk about. So let's dive on in. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter. We're at Boilers Beyond. Tweet me. Let me know what you think of the episodes. DMs are always open. Future questions that you want me to talk about, all of that. Just give me a shout on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. Again, we are in the heart of this. There is so much to talk about here. And we will do it all for you as we continue into the heart of Big Ten season. Purdue picked up another pair of wins since we last spoke. We last talked after Purdue's win over Michigan State on Monday. On Thursday, Purdue hit the road again and cruised past Minnesota 61-39. I don't have much to say about that game. You know, Purdue came in with a business-like approach. They didn't mess around with a bad team. They put them away easily. So easily, the game was over so quick that, during that second half, we had John Crispin, the color commentator on ESPN, comparing Fletcher Lawyer to Zion Williamson, comparing Braden Smith to Allen Iverson. Those are ones I haven't heard before. So, I had the announcers digging deep into the well of things to talk about to keep folks engaged. It was a great defensive performance from Purdue. Braden Smith was fantastic in that one. And then Purdue came home on Sunday to finish a week with 3 games and looked the part of a team that had played 4 games in the past 9 days. They sneak past Maryland, 58-55. I'm recording this here on Sunday night, so if I say today, when you're listening to it, it won't be today, but it's today for me. Purdue led by 14 at the half, and then a combination of Maryland's press and Maryland's mixed bag of defensive looks that they threw at Purdue really gave the Boilermakers some problems. They forced 15 Purdue turnovers. Purdue made just 2 of 13 shots from beyond the arc. That's not a winning combination. Nor is scoring 23 points in the second half. That's all Purdue did. However, it was enough. Purdue had a good first half. They led by 14 at the break. That was enough to get Purdue the win, get them past the finish line in a game that they just kind of had to drag out. I think, the amount of games Purdue had played, 4 in 9 days, dating back to that Nebraska game, maybe that caught up with them a little bit. I thought Braden Smith looked a little bit tired. Zach Edey certainly might have been. If he was, I can't say I blame him. Purdue just in general didn't have a great game, but they held on to win, 58-55. The fans not thrilled about it, but it beats losing. I think an interesting way to look at this is that I don't know that I'm necessarily stunned that Purdue has struggled a little bit with the 2 East Coast teams in the Big Ten, in Maryland and Rutgers. You look at how the conference is built, and those 2 teams have never quite taken on necessarily a Big Ten style. Rutgers certainly, they're in your face, they're brash, they're incredibly physical, they're long on the perimeter. They're not necessarily your typical Big Ten team. And in Maryland, I think especially with Kevin Willard kind of coming from the Big East, the way, Rutgers used to be a Big East program, I think a little bit of that East Coast mindset, the East Coast brand of basketball, very brash, very very grabby, not a lot of freedom of movement. I'm not necessarily surprised that Purdue has struggled with those teams a little bit. Those both of them were really physical with Purdue. And Matt Painter was as animated as I've seen him, both during the game and after the game as it relates to officiating. He was not happy with the way Zach Edey was officiated against Maryland. I can't necessarily say I blame him. I haven't gone back and watched the game, but, certainly Purdue was dealing with, getting hit. They were dealing with a lot of contact down low. They certainly did against Rutgers as well. That was a game where Zach Edey got in some foul trouble, but, it's Purdue with Courtney Green. It can't possibly be a normal game. Everything about that game was just weird. Weirdly officiated game, if nothing else. But I think just the identity of those teams and how long they are and how willing to play out on the perimeter they are, I think that can be an area where Purdue can struggle. I think you've seen the physicality of those teams impact Purdue's freshman guards. If you go back to Rutgers, Braden Smith didn't have a great game. Matt Painter kind of called him out for it after the game. And, led to him having 2 phenomenal games back-to-back after that. And then, Fletcher Lawyer, he hit the shot against Rutgers, but he hadn't had a great game before then. Again, against Maryland, it's not like Lawyer had a great day. 3 for 9 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. So be it. It's a learning experience. It's these freshmen going through the Big Ten for the first time. There are going to be ups and downs. I think when you look, though, at the number of close games that Purdue is playing, there are a couple of ways to look at it. One of my friends in a group text after the game just said Purdue's playing with fire. And he's right. He's 100% right here. Purdue, this week, they had Michigan State get the ball with a shot from, it was Walker who took it, yeah. Tyson Walker that, didn't stand a prayer, but if he made it, it would have won the game. And then Jameer Young almost had the ball stolen by Ethan Morton, had a shot that would have sent it to overtime from, 35 feet or so. It could have easily been a 1-2 week for Purdue. By my count, they've had 5 of their first 9 Big Ten games really come down to the wire. At Nebraska, Rutgers, Ohio State, Michigan State, Maryland. That's a lot of games coming down to the wire. And I think if you extend it to the whole season, you got to put Marquette in there. That was a game where Purdue needed a big run in the last 10 minutes to take. So you're seeing Purdue, at least in Big Ten play, they're 4-1 in these games down to the wire. You can look at that and say that, that they're due for a little bit of regression to the mean here. That, in theory, these toss-up games should be just that, toss-ups. Now, Purdue does some things really well that benefit them in these games. They shoot free throws at a really good clip as a team. As of now, Purdue's 76.7% from the foul line on the season. But extend it just past that. Look at some of the individual numbers. Braden Smith's shooting 90%. He's on the floor at the end of those games. 79% for Fletcher Lawyer. And a bunch of those misses came early on in the season. He's on the floor at the end of games. You're not going to find a better free throw shooting big man than Zach Edey at 74%. That's pretty good. Gillis, 86%. Morton, 86%. This is a really good free throw shooting team. That really helps. You look at the game against Maryland, and Purdue went 16 of 18 from the foul line. Braden Smith goes 8 for 8. That's big time stuff. It absolutely helps to have the best player on the floor. Zach Edey's been dominant. Anytime Purdue has needed him to bail them out, he's done it. I'd tweeted late in the game against Maryland, I don't know that Zach Edey is going to be able to do this one by himself. And I don't know that I'd say it was by himself, but it wasn't far from it. He kind of led Purdue to that win today. Now, on the flip side, the turnovers are getting a little worrisome because that is an area that is causing some of these close games. Rutgers, Purdue turned it over too much. Don't remember what they did at Ohio State, but I feel like I remember turnovers early. 15 turnovers against Maryland. That's too many. If you look at just the data, at the stats, Purdue commits 11 turnovers per game, which is a pretty good number. You're pretty happy with that. But Purdue does have a negative turnover margin. They don't force a lot of turnovers. That's not necessarily Purdue's style on defense, but they still don't force a lot of turnovers. So limiting them on offense is really important. You saw how many runouts Maryland had in this game, and it's concerning because Purdue isn't the best equipped team to negate just bad turnovers and easy buckets. Purdue's offense is remarkably efficient. They're sitting well in KenPom, I think, still. They're number 4 in offensive efficiency right now. That's really good, but they don't have the explosive nature that necessarily can put you on a 15-0 run real quick and turn a game on its side. You can't have that many turnovers. I think that's a real issue here. Now, if Purdue has a little regression, if they drop a few close games here, I know folks are going to freak out. I don't think that's really warranted. I think that's more normal than anything. But, I think as a positive look at this, Purdue's well tested. They've been in a lot of close games, and they're answering the call. And they're doing the little things well to win those games the very way they did the little things so poorly last year that cost them so many of those close games. I mean, think about it. Purdue had lost to Rutgers in Piscataway at this time last year in a close game. Purdue had lost to Wisconsin at home. Not that close of a game, but Purdue lost at home. That was a concern. Purdue lost at Indiana in a close game down there. Rob Finney's shot. Something else. There was something else too before this point, I believe, that gave you a little bit of reason for pause. So I think it's really good to note how well Purdue is doing those little things that are winning them these close games, even though, of course, in a perfect world, not all of them get this close. If you look at this past week from a Big Ten wide perspective, I don't think this week could have gone much better for Purdue, if you ask me. Everybody else in the league now has 3+ conference losses. And there are only 4 teams, I guess, looking at the standings, Northwestern's there. Only 4 teams have 3 Big Ten losses. We're not even at the halfway mark yet. A lot of teams have only played 8 Big Ten games. Wisconsin's only played 7. So, Purdue's in a really good spot here. When you're not at the halfway mark yet, and you have a 2-game lead in the conference, that's fantastic. On Thursday, you saw both Rutgers and Michigan lose. They fell from 2 to 3 losses. So this is giving Purdue a little bit more of a cushion here. I'll caution, at this point, because Purdue's not going to sit here and, win their next 11 and go 30-1. That's just not going to happen. That's not realistic. But from a statistical perspective, I think you look at this and say 15-5 will at bare minimum get you a share of the league title. And I think, just looking at it here, 15-5 might win it for you outright. 16-4 absolutely will. I'd be stunned if any of these teams only lost 1 game from here on out. I think 2 things. Purdue has 11 games left. 6 of them are at Mackey Arena. That's a really big positive. You've gotten some tough road trips out of the way. You have gone to Michigan State. That's always a tough one. That atmosphere at the Palestra was a pretty daunting one. Purdue handled that one easily. Historically, Value City Arena's not been the easiest place for Purdue to win, even though it's the quietest gym in the Big Ten. Purdue got that out of the way. So that's positive. That's really positive. The negative is that you're done with you're done with Minnesota and you're done with Nebraska. 4 of your first 9 have been those 2 teams. Those are probably the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten. So you're done with them. That doesn't help, but you went 4-0 there. You did what you were supposed to do. So now that you look here, with a 2-game lead, who worries you? I do think Michigan and Rutgers both can be a little concerning. Those are the 2 teams with 3 losses. Indiana's playing well right now. I thought Illinois was playing well, maybe not. But right now, I think that Rutgers, Michigan, Indiana trio would be where I'd look at teams that can go on a run here and get themselves right in this Big Ten race. Purdue's energy really helped them this week. It was a really good week on defense. 39 points allowed, 55 points allowed. That's going to win almost every single night in the Big Ten. This isn't the most skilled or gifted defensive team. Let's point that out here. Ethan Morton's a really good defender. He's done a fantastic job. Zach Edey has been leaps and bounds better defensively than I'd expected. He's really become a nice rim protector, and he really, really makes teams think about going into the lane. But, past that, it's not like there's all sorts of big-time defensive ability on this team. But they play hard. Caleb First and Mason Gillis. Between those 2, you are getting big-time effort at the 4 for 40 minutes a game. The effort never stops between those 2. That's big. The freshman guards certainly have a lot to learn on defense in the Big Ten, but they're so competitive. They're so dialed in to what they need to do to get better that, you don't notice them struggling on the defensive end, even though they have every reason in the world to be struggling as a freshman in the conference. They've been excellent, and that competitive nature of those 2 has really raised all ships around them. It's been really, really fun to watch. They play hard, and they're well connected. I think when you just watch this team, the chemistry, they play together so much better than last year's team did. And the personalities are certainly a big part of that. Having a clear leader is certainly a part of that. But just the way Purdue has been connected in playing hard and doing little things well has been so important. It's helped mask one of the big things that I don't really know how well Purdue does, and that's shooting the 3-pointer. Right now we're 20 games in, and Purdue's shooting 32.6% from 3. But when you look at it, only one guy is above 40%, and that's Braden Smith, sitting at 44% from 3. He's not exactly as loose of a cannon as I thought he'd be. He's very selective about the 3-pointers he takes, but he's making a bunch of them. Only 2 other guys above 35%. That's the Fort Wayne duo and Lawyer and First. They're both at 36%. You've got Brandon Newman at 34, Mason Gillis at 32. Look, as a whole, this isn't a great 3-point shooting team statistically. Now, we know Fletcher Lawyer can get hot. We know Braden Smith's dangerous. I think Brandon Newman's an all right 3-point shooter, but I don't think he is going to have any games like that Minnesota game his freshman year. Mason Gillis is not shooting the way he did early on last year when he was just red hot as can be. Teams are going to make Purdue beat them. Teams are going to, and you saw it with Maryland. teams are going to try to force the ball out of Zach Edey's hands and make Purdue knock down open threes. Until Purdue can do that, I think they're going to see more of this. I think it's going to be an area where, teams are going to force the issue with Purdue. And if they can answer the call, if Fletcher Lawyer gets a bunch of open looks, you'll take that. Braden Smith, you'll take that. I think these guys are all decent shooters, but right now, 20 games in, you got to be shooting better than 32% as a team. That's an area where I'm a little bit concerned. We saw a little bit too in the game against Maryland early on. It didn't end up biting Purdue. Purdue actually handled it just fine. Look, Purdue's really dependent on having Zach Edey on the floor. And even against Minnesota, the splits when Edey was on versus off the floor were pretty remarkable in that game. It's not to bag on Trey Kaufman-Renn, because it's worth pointing out that most freshmen, and even though he redshirted, he's still a freshman. Most freshmen do not do what Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer have done. That's not normal. Trey Kaufman-Renn is having a much more typical freshman season, where at times, against some of the mid-major programs that Purdue played, and the first time they played Minnesota, Trey Kaufman-Renn played really well. He looked really good in some of those games. But against some of the better competition, as they get into the heart of Big Ten play, as there's a little more scouting, opponents are a little bit more physically capable, he hasn't been as good. He's really been struggling of late. And, look, it's not worth beating the kid over. He's a good player. He's absolutely a good player. I think there's a lot to like about his future at Purdue, but I've seen this notion that he's not a 5. And I push back on that a little bit. Certainly when you look at how Purdue's 5s have been in recent years, and I mean guys playing the center position, the 5, look, he's not a 7-footer. He's not A.J. Hammonds. He's not Isaac Haas. He's not Zach Edey. But you don't have to be 7 feet. I mean, Travion Williams wasn't. Caleb Swanigan wasn't. He's not as wide as those guys are, but you don't have to be 7 foot plus. I think when you look at him as a 4, look, to be a 4 in Purdue's system, you got to shoot the 3 ball. He's 4 for 19 from 3 on the season. I don't know if he can guard the perimeter, but Purdue's 4s have to do that quite a bit. All 4s do. I don't know that it's as much out of position as much as it is just he's a freshman in the Big Ten. And that's a big jump. It's a big jump. And the level of play that you have to be at, the level of scouting, all of that is much different than anything he's ever seen in his life. So I think it's important to note that he may not be out of position just as much as he is still learning quite a bit. And that's really normal. It's really important for Purdue that Zach Edey stay on the floor. I don't think you want to put too much on Trey Kaufman-Renn's plate. But, nonetheless, at some point this year, Purdue's going to need him. Zach Edey will get in foul trouble at some point, and they're going to need Trey Kaufman-Renn to go in there and give them some big minutes. I had a question that I thought kind of deserved its own segment here. I had a question last week. What do you make of the Brandon Newman and Ethan Morton haters who don't see what they're doing for the team outside of scoring? And, yes, obviously this every year, and I don't think this is a Purdue thing. I think this is every team probably, but I think Purdue fans really get into it where there's a player who fans want to see more of, and there's a player who fans want to see less of. And this year, I don't know that there's anyone that fans really want to see more of. Maybe it's Newman. I know he's a very fan favorite, but fans have been very vocal about Ethan Morton. That there's maybe it's a minority, but folks are out there that aren't fans of Ethan Morton. You look at last year, like half the replies anytime Purdue basketball would tweet something would be Brandon Newman needs to play more. Then he came in against Penn State in the Big Ten tournament, went 4 for 4 from the field. Then the rest of the season went 2 for 10. But nonetheless, he stuck around. He didn't transfer when he very easily could have. Gave fans a lot to root for there. It's certainly not been the year he's hoped for. He got beat out fair and square by Fletcher Loyer. Loyer's a better shooter. He handles the ball better, processes the game better. He got beat out fair and square. But I think, I'll separate this conversation between Brandon Newman and Ethan Morton because they play two very different roles. And that's important to clarify because even though they're off-ball guards, they play very different roles. Brandon Newman is asked to be a scoring piece off the bench who can come in and play some defense. He's gotten better on defense. I will give him that. He has certainly improved there from last year to this. Still has his moments, but he's gotten better as a whole. In terms of scoring, though, it's been up and down. You look at that game against Minnesota the other night where he had 8 points. He had 11 against Rutgers, but past that, and I guess the first time against Minnesota, he had 13. But, largely, it's been up and down this season. His production has not been all that consistent. As a whole, he's shooting 38% from the field, 34% from three. So, probably not the level that you'd hoped for. And he needs to cut down the turnovers. Being third on the team in turnovers, but just sixth in minutes played, that's a really tough combo. That's an issue for Brandon Newman. And, his turnovers aren't the best ones. Like the other night at Minnesota, a very obvious charge. And then, throws a pass into the lane that is just way, way, way late. The defender had already cleared Zach Edey and was taking the ball the other way. So, in terms of what are folks not seeing with him, I don't know that I think there's much, but, again, he's a guy that Purdue needs to play well. Purdue needs to knock down shots at the end of the day. On Ethan Morton, his role's a little different. And it's not the glamorous role. He's Purdue's best post-entry passer. That's pretty important. He gets the ball to Zach Edey really well. And of course, as I mentioned earlier on, he's clearly Purdue's best perimeter defender. And that's something you absolutely have to have in the Big Ten. Of course, no, he has not shot well from three-point range on the season. That much is very clear. He's, down 20% from last season. That's almost unheard of. But, that's reality. He's not a dynamic scorer off the bounce. But when you look at what he did just this past week, Jamison Battle didn't score, and Jameer Young went 4 of 18 from the floor. And not all 4 of those makes were on Ethan Morton. Somebody's got to guard people, and Ethan Morton has done that. He's the guy who you can put on the opposing team's best player. I suspect that he'll see the Howard kid, Jet Howard, this week at Michigan. And I suspect he'll see a combination of Tyson Walker and A.J. Hogard again against Michigan State on Sunday. Ethan Morton plays that role that's not glamorous, but it's absolutely critical. And look, of course, does he need to shoot better from three? Yes, absolutely. He needs to be better on offense, just in all forms of it. Minus, I guess, not passing. He's a great passer, great assist to turnover ratio, but Purdue needs him to score a little bit more, but don't try to make him something he's not. Expecting him to be a double-digit scorer isn't realistic. You just need him to knock down that open three and continue to be an excellent defender. He's been really, really good for you there. He plays really hard. He had that chase down block today against Maryland that was really big. Took a couple of charges. he does some really good things for you. They're the little things, but those are the little things, again, that last year's team never did. It had some of the flash, but it didn't have the substance. If you want more substance than just the flash, Ethan Morton's the type of guy you need on the floor. It's a big week coming up here for Purdue. It's good that they get a little bit of time off. They need it. Just 3 full days off between games, but that's very welcomed after what Purdue has gone through playing a bunch of games in not a big amount of time. 4 games in 9 days. Thursday, they have a 9 p.m. tip at Michigan, and then Sunday they come home for a 12:15 tip inside Mackey against Michigan State. You look first at that game at Michigan. You know, the Chrysler Center has given Purdue some real problems in recent years. Just 1-7 over the last 8 games up there are the Boilermakers. Probably doesn't come as too much of a surprise. Michigan's been very good over the last decade, especially, you know, those few years where Purdue struggled. Michigan was phenomenal with Trey Burke and that crew, Glenn Robinson III, Tim Hardaway. They had a really good group there. So it's not the biggest surprise that Purdue struggled. It's going to be interesting to see how this game unfolds, though. I have no idea what to make of Michigan. You know, they've been so up and down. They lost to Central Michigan. They barely beat Eastern Michigan. They got blown out by Arizona State. Today, they just squeaked by Minnesota at home. Michigan only won by 4. But they've looked good at times, too. They really should have won at Iowa. That was a game I couldn't believe they lost. Who else have they beaten? You know, they beat Northwestern, who's not bad. Beat Penn State pretty handily. That was a game Penn State was never really there in. They have a 35-point win over Maryland. They also lost to Maryland the other day, but, you know, they've looked good at times too. Hunter Dickinson is someone that Purdue fans know very well. He's obviously very good. He's scoring 17, 18 points a game. He's excellent. Jet Howard, Jawan's kid, is one of the best freshmen in the conference. Shouldn't say the country, but he's probably not far off. He's scoring 15 points a game. He can really shoot it from deep. That game against Iowa that I referenced, I don't know how many of you watched that, but the start that he got off to in that game was absurd. He's a really dangerous player. He's a one and done. He's very, very good. The X's and O's of this game are going to be really interesting. Hunter Dickinson is going to have to knock down threes for Michigan in this game. And, you know, he doesn't shoot a ton of threes as, you know, just in the normal flow of Michigan's offense. But like last year against Purdue at Mackey Arena, he hit 2 or 3 threes and hit some mid-range jumpers. He did a lot of really good stuff. He puts Purdue in quite the bind because he has a nice jump shot. He does a lot of things that, you know, can pull Zach Edey out and then go attack off the dribble, open up a lot of things. He's dangerous there. He's only shot 25 threes on the year, but he's made 10 of them, 40%. It's going to be a really interesting game to watch. That, schematically, is going to be really fascinating. What Jawan Howard does, you never know. I really never know what to expect with him. But, you know, that's a place where Purdue struggled. That's a style of basketball that Purdue struggled against a little bit. You know, 9 p.m. game, Purdue's going to be ready to play. Purdue's been ready to play in every game, but that's going to be interesting. Purdue's bigs have had some success against Michigan, though. I would suspect Zach Edey's going to, you know, have a good game. You look at what Travion Williams did against them over the years. He had some big-time games. Whether Michigan's going to double or not will be interesting. I don't fully know what to expect there. They certainly can. I don't know I don't watch enough Michigan. I haven't watched them enough this year to really know. They're young. They, especially in the backcourt, they're really young. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect. On just looking at the teams on paper, Purdue is the more accomplished team. But just knowing how Michigan plays, they've given Purdue fits in the past. I worry about that. And then you flip it, on Sunday, Purdue welcomes Michigan State to Mackey Arena for a bit of a rematch. Man, that's going to be a tough game. It's a quick turnaround. It's an exciting game. It's a great matchup. Watching Painter and Izzo go at it's awesome stuff. I don't know that I love that there's only 13 days between the two games. That part's not necessarily ideal. I am sure that Tom Izzo is going to try to do the same deal he did last time. Play Edey one-on-one, scream for fouls, and hope for the best. If he deviates from that, I would be utterly stunned, but I guess anything is possible. Whether he gets those fouls or not, I don't know. He's been working the officials pretty darn well. He's made no shortage of comments about his thoughts. His press conference after that last Purdue game was wild. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I don't know that Tyson Walker could possibly play any better. A.J. Hoggard was pretty good too. Ethan Morton's going to loom large in this game because he can't guard both of them, and they're both dangerous. But it's been a while since Michigan State's won in Mackey Arena. If Purdue wins, we can talk about that on the show next week. I think a 1-1 week here wouldn't be the worst thing. Obviously, you want to go 2-0. Obviously, you really don't want to go 0-2. Michigan really worries me. Again, just something about that game doesn't feel good. And then trying to sweep Michigan State, it's quite the tall task. I'm not saying it's impossible. Purdue did it 2017, Miles Bridges' freshman year, and then Caleb Swanigan's last year at Purdue. Purdue swept them then, but it is not easy to do. I had a quick question about the Purdue-Indiana game coming up in a few weeks. There's been no shortage of discourse on Twitter. Purdue and IU fans going at it already. But I had the question of, when was the last time these two teams were this good? And, that comes as Indiana's playing well of late. Indiana's won 3 in a row. They have had some decent wins. Wisconsin, Illinois, on the road against Illinois, and then Michigan State. That's a good stretch of wins there for Indiana. And as you look at their schedule, it sets up nicely for them to be feeling some momentum when Purdue comes to town on Saturday, February 4th. I think at least 2016 is the last time these two teams were both, were combined this good. IU won the Big Ten that year, Yogi Ferrell's senior year. Purdue had a good team as well. A.J. Hammond's, Rafael Davis senior year. Caleb Swanigan freshman. Yeah, that's probably the last time that comes to mind. That was a good game down in Bloomington. IU won by a couple. But if you're going before that, then you're going to 2007 probably. Eric Gordon as a freshman against the Baby Boilers. That was a good game down in Assembly Hall. IU won that, but that was a good game as well. So might be my answer there. A closing thought here. Purdue won another close game where they didn't necessarily look the best. But as I sit here tonight, Kansas went 0-2 this week, and number 1 Houston lost to Temple. So it's possible that Alabama jumps Purdue in the AP poll, but just, from a process of elimination, it is more than likely that Purdue's going to be number 1 in this week's AP poll. Purdue's 19-1. It's the best 20-game start in school history. Enjoy what this has been. Enjoy what Purdue is doing right now. I know it's, It's the time where the conversation is about to shift to March. And it's going to be all about NCAA tournament. How far can Purdue get? Can they finally, get to whatever level fans want, whether it's past the Sweet 16 to a Final Four to win the whole damn thing, whatever it is. And, I completely agree. I'd love to see Purdue do it. Everyone would. But if you're not enjoying what this season has been, then you're looking at things from a really tough way to enjoy life, to enjoy what you enjoy. There were not high expectations for this year's Purdue team. This was not a situation where anyone, and I mean anyone, expected Purdue to be 19-1. Hell, I thought Purdue would probably lose twice at PK 85 over Thanksgiving weekend, and they still haven't lost their second game yet. I'll knock on wood for that. But please enjoy this. I mean, what Zach Edey has been, to be a National Player of the Year frontrunner at Purdue. Something that, they flirted with a little bit in 2017 and Caleb Swanigan, in 2011 and Jawan Johnson. But Purdue hasn't had that since 1994. Many of my listeners weren't alive then. Neither was I. Purdue's looking, in a good spot to win a Big Ten championship. Now, they've still got to go out and do it. Nothing's given, but Purdue's, those aren't easy to win. Purdue's in position to do some really cool things this year before March comes. If you don't enjoy those, I just think you're really taking a difficult approach to this. And I know how important the NCAA tournament is, but I just encourage you that if you're not enjoying this, then you're probably doing it wrong. But I know that's kind of awkward to say, but just try to be happy about this. Try to enjoy what's going on right now and not worry about March too much until the calendar flips and you start humming the CBS theme music all day long. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you for spending your time with me. Next week, I'll be right back here following those two games against the Michigans. Talk about everything that happens on the hardwood, and we'll talk about what's next for Purdue after whatever happens. Send any questions my way on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Be sure to follow and let me know your thoughts. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss anything. But until next time, guys, enjoy the week of hoops and take care.